All right, Joshua, are we ready to read? We're talking about Abraham's test. It says, when Isaac was about 15 years old, God gave Abraham a test of his obedience and faithfulness. God spoke to Abraham, take Isaac, your only son, and go to a mountain in the land of Moriah. Offer Isaac to me as a burnt offering sacrifice. How sad Abraham was to receive this command from God. But Abraham listened because it was God who had spoken, and he trusted God. At the place God had told Abraham about, he and Isaac built the altar. They placed wood on top of it. Then Abraham fastened Isaac's hands and feet and laid him on the wood. After that came the awful moment. Abraham took a knife and lifted it up to kill his only son Isaac. But at that very moment, a messenger of God spoke. Abraham, Abraham, do not touch Isaac. Now I know how much you love God and want to serve him. You have not kept back your only son from him. A noise in the bushes attracted Abraham's attention. Abraham looked up. Right in front of him, caught by its horns in a thorn bush, was a ram. Together Abraham and Isaac used the ram for a sacrifice offering. They worshiped God there. Abraham knew that he could trust God no matter what happened. Joseph and the beautiful coat. Joseph was one of 12 sons. His father was Jacob. They lived in the land of Canaan. Jacob was very fond of his son Joseph. Benjamin, the youngest brother, looked up to Joseph, but his older brothers disliked him for bragging about the gifts his father gave him. When Joseph was 17 years old, Jacob gave him a coat made of many colors of cloth. It was a beautiful coat. Joseph's brothers became jealous and hated him. Our father loves Joseph more than he loves us, they grumbled. Look at that coat. It is finer than any of our coats. One night Joseph had a dream. When he told his brothers about the dream, the next day they hated him even more. In his dream, all the brothers had been cutting wheat in the fields, and each one bound what he had cut into a bundle. Then Joseph's sheaf of wheat stood up, and all the others bowed down to it. A few nights later, Joseph dreamed again. Once more he told his brothers that he had dreamed. This time he saw the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowing down to him. And then even his father was angry. What is this? Jacob said. Am I and your mother and your brothers all to kneel before you? Later all the brothers except Joseph and Benjamin went out to look after sheep. When they had been away several days, Jacob sent out Joseph to see them and to find out how they were getting along. As his brothers saw him coming toward them, but still a long way off, they decided that they would kill him. The brothers took Joseph's coat from him and then threw him into a hole. Then they noticed an Ishmaelite camel train on its way to Egypt with all kinds of spices to sell there. One of the brothers, Judah, had a plan. He suggested that they sell Joseph to the Ishmaelites to be sold again as a slave in Egypt. The brothers took Joseph's coat and tore it. Then they dipped it in the blood of a goat that they had killed. They sent this blood-stained coat back to Jacob. When Jacob saw the coat, he was terribly upset. He believed that a wild animal had killed his favorite son. Joseph the slave. When the merchants reached Egypt, they took Joseph to the slave market. Captain Potiphar, who was the head of the palace guard, found Joseph in the slave market. He liked Joseph the minute he saw him. Potiphar paid the price the traders asked for Joseph. Joseph's life was different now. Once he had been the favorite son of a Hebrew chief. Now he was only a slave. Joseph the country boy was in Egypt, living in a big house full of servants in a city of big houses. At first he was angry and thought how wicked his brothers had been. But after a while he remembered the stories he had told and how boastful he had been. He asked God to forgive him and help him to be brave. Through all his troubles, Joseph remembered to pray to God as his father had taught him. Joseph worked hard for Potiphar. As the years passed, his master trusted him more and more. Joseph was careful and faithful. When he finished the job, it was well done. When Joseph was old enough, Potiphar made him head of all the servants in the house. Then Captain Potiphar made Joseph head of the work that was done outside the house in the fields. At last Joseph was promoted to be superintendent of all Potiphar's businesses. Then something terrible happened. Potiphar's wife told her husband lies about Joseph. Potiphar believed all his wife said and threw Joseph into prison. But Joseph knew he had done nothing wrong and prayed that God would help him. Joseph in prison. In prison, Joseph was the same faithful, hard-working young man he had been in Potiphar's house. The keeper of the prison discovered that he had a good worker who could be trusted. He began to give Joseph jobs to do. The prison keeper put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. One day, two new prisoners were put into the prison. One was Pharaoh's chief butler, the other was Pharaoh's chief baker. One night each of them had a dream. The butler had seen a vine, and the vine had 3 branches. Then he saw those branches producing branches of ripe grapes. He took those grapes and pressed out their juice into Pharaoh's cup, which he had in his hand. Then he gave the cup to Pharaoh. Joseph listened to the dream and said, This dream means that Pharaoh will send for you within 3 days and give you back your job. When you are back in the palace, think of me and tell Pharaoh that I have been wrongly put into prison. I was even stolen away from the land of the Hebrews. Then Joseph listened to the baker's dream. The baker had seen himself carrying 3 baskets on his head, one on top of the other. In the top basket there were all kinds of cakes and baked food, but birds flew down and ate. Joseph said, This is what your dream means. In 3 days from now, Pharaoh will send for you, and will have you put to death. 3 days later, it all came true. Pharaoh sent for his head butler and gave him back his old position, but he gave orders for the baker to be hanged. In prison, Joseph waited and waited to hear from the butler, but the butler had forgotten. For nearly 2 years, Joseph waited, hoping to be set free. Then one night, Pharaoh had a strange dream. None of the wise men could tell him what it meant. Suddenly, the butler remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh all about the way his dream had been explained. Pharaoh ordered Joseph to be brought before him. I have dreamed a dream that no one can explain. I have heard about you and your cleverness in understanding dreams, said Pharaoh. God gives me understanding, Joseph answered. Pharaoh began, I was standing on the river bank when I saw 7 cows coming up out of the water. They were fat and well fed. They walked over into the meadow and began to graze. While I was watching, 7 more cows came up out of the river. They were the poorest, sickest, scrawniest cows I have ever seen. They ate up the good fat cows, and they were still just as scrawny as they were before. Next, I dreamed I saw a stalk of corn that had 7 good full ears. I saw another stalk with 7 ears that had been parched dry by the hot wind from the desert. Those burnt, withered ears of corn ate up the good ears. God is showing Pharaoh what he is going to do, Joseph told him. Both dreams mean the same thing. The 7 fat cows and the 7 good ears stand for 7 years when the crops are going to be good, and everyone will have plenty to eat. The 7 thin, sick cows and the 7 dried up ears of corn stand for the next 7 years, when nothing is going to grow and people will starve. Then Joseph made a suggestion to Pharaoh. Men should be appointed to put away some of the food during plentiful years. Then there would be food for the famine years. Pharaoh was amazed at what Joseph told him. Pharaoh was so impressed by Joseph's cleverness that he put him in charge of all the food supplies. He made Joseph the greatest ruler in all Egypt, next to himself in importance. Joseph the ruler. When Pharaoh made Joseph in charge of all the land of Egypt, he gave Joseph a ring. He ordered Joseph to be dressed in fine linen clothes and put a gold chain around his neck. Joseph went right to work. He traveled over Egypt to find out how the crops were growing. He ordered the people to build huge warehouses. He organized men to collect the grain for storage, preparing for the famine, which he knew would come. This went on for 7 years. So much grain was stored in the warehouses that the officers gave up trying to measure it. Then the good years ended. The years of famine came. There was no food to take home or to the market. People ate the last bit of food stored in their own homes. What shall we do? Where shall we find food? Give us bread to eat, they begged Pharaoh. Go to Joseph. He will tell you what to do. Joseph ordered the doors of the warehouses opened. Carefully and wisely he organized the work of giving out the grain. There was enough food for everyone, but none was wasted. Joseph had his own family now. He had married an Egyptian girl. Her name was Asenath. The names Joseph gave to his 2 sons showed how happy he was. One was called Manasseh, which means causing to forget. The other was named Ephraim, which means having plenty. Only Egypt had stored food for the famine years because Joseph had listened to what God had said. Egypt had enough grain to be able to sell even to the other countries. Are you still with me? Okay. Joseph and his brothers. Back in the land of Canaan there was hunger because of the famine. Jacob heard that the Egyptians had plenty of food to sell. Jacob had great riches but no food. So Jacob sent 10 of Joseph's brothers to Egypt to buy grain. Only Benjamin, the youngest brother, was kept at home. Jacob was afraid that something might happen to him. After a long journey through the desert, Joseph's brothers arrived in Egypt. They went straight to the governor in charge of the wheat stores. They did not know this man was their own brother, Joseph. They all bowed down to him, exactly as Joseph's dream many years before had said they would. The brothers did not know him, but Joseph knew who they were. Still, he treated them as if they were strangers. Where do you come from? He asked them. From Canaan to buy food, they answered. You are just spies, Joseph said. You have come to search for the weak places in the land. No, Lord, they pleaded. All we want is to buy food. We're all the sons of one man. We're all brothers. Our youngest brother is still at home with our father, and one brother has disappeared. We only want to buy food. We are not spies. Joseph would not listen to them. I shall put you to the test. All of you, except one, will be kept in prison. The other brother must go and get your youngest brother. If he is not brought, then the rest of you will be treated like spies. For 3 days they were in prison. Then Joseph had them brought before him. He changed the whole plan. Only one of them would have to stay in prison while the rest went to get the youngest brother. Simon was chosen to stay in Egypt and was taken to prison. The rest of the brothers were sent home. That evening, when the brothers stopped for the night, one of the brothers opened a sack of grain to get a little food for his donkey. There he found the money that should have been left with Joseph, and there was money in the sacks of the other brothers as well. They were all afraid. When they arrived at home, they told their father Jacob all that had happened, and that Simon had been left behind. They told Jacob how the governor wanted them to bring their youngest brother, but Jacob cried, Joseph is dead, Simon has gone, and now you want to take Benjamin away from me? He would not allow it. When the food brought from Egypt had nearly all been used, Jacob said to his sons, Go to Egypt again and buy us more food. Judah told his father, Father, the man who sold us the food said he would have nothing more to do with us unless we brought our youngest brother with us. If you would let Benjamin go with us, then we will go to Egypt for food. If not, we cannot go. Benjamin shall go with you, Jacob promised. Once more the brothers came to the place in Egypt where the food was sold. Joseph saw them arrive, but he did not pay attention to them. Instead, he sent his servant to take them to his home and prepare a great feast. When Joseph came home, the brothers bowed before him. They handed him their presents they had brought. When Joseph was friendly, but did not say a word about being their brother. All he did was ask how they were. He asked how their father was. Then he looked at his own brother Benjamin. He asked if this was the youngest brother they had told him about. Joseph longed to tell his brothers who he was, but he wanted to be sure they had really become better men. He had a plan to test them. He ordered his servants to hide his silver cup in Benjamin's sack of grain. The next morning, as soon as it was light, the brothers started on their way home. They were not far from the city when Joseph sent his servants after them. When the servant caught the brothers, he asked them how they could be so ungrateful as to have stolen Joseph's cup. The brothers denied having stolen anything. They did not know what was in their bags. And then the cup was found. Sadly, the brothers went back with the servant to face Joseph's anger. They threw themselves down in front of him. They promised to become his slaves. Joseph told them to go home to their father, except the one whose bag the cup had been found. Without Benjamin, they would not dare go home. They pleaded with Joseph. Judah begged to be allowed to stay as a slave in place of Benjamin. Joseph could not stand it any longer. He sent all the Egyptians out of the room. When they had gone, Joseph told his brothers who he was. The brothers were afraid. They remembered what they had done to Joseph. But he said, "Do not be afraid. I came here as a slave, but God has made me a great man in the land. I still have much work to do because there is a famine in our own land. You must go back home and get our father Jacob and all our families and your flocks. I will see to it that Pharaoh gives you a place to live." They hugged and kissed. Then he hugged and kissed all his brothers, especially Benjamin. Are you still with me? Okay, my phone's dying. If it goes dead, we'll have to talk later, okay? Moses in a basket boat. About 300 years after the death of Joseph, a cruel Pharaoh ruled over the land of Egypt. He made slaves of the Israelites, or Hebrews as they were called by the Egyptians. The Pharaoh ordered his soldiers to kill the baby boys in every Hebrew family. One Hebrew mother named Jochebed wove a basket out of bulrushes. She covered the basket inside and out with pitch to make it watertight. Then she put her baby son in a basket and hid the basket among the bulrushes at the edge of the Nile River. "The soldiers will never find him there," she told her daughter Miriam. Jochebed went home to look after Aaron, her other son. Miriam stayed to watch over the baby from a little distance away. After watching for a while, Miriam heard some people coming. She saw that it was one of Pharaoh's daughters coming down to the river with her maids. The princess saw the basket among the reeds. She sent one of the maids to get the basket. When it was opened, she saw the baby. She said sadly, "He must be one of the Hebrew babies." She knew about the cruel order her father had made. Then Miriam came out of her hiding place and said to the princess, "I will find one of the Hebrew women to take care of the baby for you if you want me to." The princess gave her permission. Then Miriam ran to get her mother. "I want you to take this child and be his nurse. I will pay you your wages. Take care of him for me." The princess laid the baby in his own mother's arms. How glad Jochebed was to hear that. Now she knew the baby would be safe and would not even have to be hidden. As soon as he was old enough, the princess sent for the child. His mother took him to the palace, and there he grew up as the princess's adopted son. He was given the name of Moses, which meant that he had been taken out of the water.